Good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, June 18th. I'm Joanne Koontz. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm with, as usual, my partner, Marina Parkin. And today we have an incredible guest for you. We have a long-time standing repeat entrepreneur and business coach, John Seiffer. John has been helping Marina and I for a couple of years now, and we wanted to bring him to you so that he could start to explore not only just leadership in general, but specifically leadership in your business through the pandemic. We have learned so much from him over the last couple of years, and it's really changed our business. And we really felt like it would be a big help to bring that to our business clients so that you could see a little sneak peek into a day in the life and how you can do things better. I know several of our clients do engage with business coaches. We always encourage that. It's nice to have someone challenge your way of thinking, especially if you are alone at the top. If you are the business owner by yourself, Marina and I at least have each other and Jackie to kick ideas off of with each other. So we've kind of got a triangle, and not everybody has the benefit of that. So when you're the leader by yourself and you don't have someone to challenge you and to help elevate you, it's really nice to have an accountability partner and a coach. So thanks so much for joining us, John. We really, really have appreciated your advice to us, and we look forward to sharing that. So welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So can you do us a favor and give us a little bit of background?
Yeah. Are you ready for me to share my screen?
Yes, if you'd like to, okay. Go ahead.
All right, let's do this. Okay, so I do work with companies that are scaling up from under 10 employees to around 100 employees. Somewhere in there, there's a huge organizational shift that happens. And it tends, if you're not prepared for it and you don't know how to do it, it can distract you from the selling and the making of the product or service that you normally do. And so that's what I help with companies do. And this presentation today is some of the stuff that I'm working with my clients about what's different through the pandemic. So I like to start with a quote from the eminent philosopher Mike Tyson, who said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I think that's maybe the way he operated his boxing, but we have certainly gotten punched in the mouth with this pandemic.
Welcome to 2020.
Yeah, exactly. And to figure out what our plan should be, I want to take a step back for a minute and talk about the difference between management and leadership and what they would look like in normal times. So let's say there's a group of us and we're going to go climb a mountain. The leader is the person who inspires us to do it in the first place. Why would we want to go up this mountain? The leader is the one going, oh man, wait till you see the view. It's really incredible up there. Don't worry about the mosquitoes and the blisters. That's okay. The view is going to be incredible. The manager is the person that says, hey, I've got the stuff for the mosquito bites, and I've got the Band-Aids for the blisters, and you got the map, right? Make sure you keep it dry when the rain comes, and I think your pack's a little too heavy. Let me take a little bit of that off. So you need both to run a company, and they're two actually separate skills. Leadership is the more simple of the two, but not necessarily the easier. So leaders have two things they do. And this is from a poll or some work by the Gallup organization. Leaders come in all kinds of personalities. There's exciting ones, there's boring ones, there's introverted, extroverted, charismatic, whatever. But they all do these two things. They see the vision of where we're going, the top of the mountain, here's what it's going to look like. And they say that vision. And they say that vision over and over and over again. And it doesn't matter what your vision is. Steve Jobs' vision was famously, we're going to put a dent in the universe. Well, not every business can do that. If your business is just, we make the best damn pizza in town, that's a great vision. Your job in saying the vision is to explain to everybody, the person that takes out the garbage, the person that orders the paper for the cash register, why their work contributes to that vision. And that's the job of leadership. Well, what do you do now when everything's going upside down? We can't really see the future the way we saw it in January. Our vision used to be about we're opening new offices or we're getting into new markets or whatever, but that's all up in the air. How you lead in that situation is you go back to the basic principles. Why are we here? How do we serve our customers? How do we serve our clients? What are the values that we provide consistently? And you remind people of those and you inspire that. Now, don't overhype it. Keep it real. Don't make it bullshit, but
Mhm.
go back to those basic principles and keep repeating those and explaining that to people and putting their work in that context. The other thing you do as a leader is you plan. Typically, our plans are projection planning, where we look at the past, we look at last year, and we say, well, we're going to make some changes, so we're going to tweak these numbers, but basically it's going to be a projection of last year. Or you say, wow, we have a recession. Well, we had one of those, 2008. Let's pull out what we did in 2008, make some tweaks to it, we'll get through it. This is so totally different. This is a health crisis that caused an economic crisis, that caused a financial crisis. It's all wrapped up.
Mhm.
Even if we solve the economics, we're still going to have a health situation until that gets resolved. And you can't really base anything. If you try to base anything on the past, you're going to end up looking something like this. So the solution for how you do planning in a pandemic is called scenario planning. And I've got a little more detail on this post on my website, but I'll go over the nuts and bolts of it right now. Is you, with a scenario plan, you say, I don't know what the future is going to be like, but I can envision 4 or 5 completely different scenarios that are unrelated to each other. Maybe one scenario is we get a vaccine and everything's back up to speed by January. Maybe another scenario is we never get a vaccine and the recession is a W-shaped one or a U-shaped one, and it goes on for 24 months. Maybe another one, and I'm encouraging my clients to look at a best case scenario as well. Maybe another one is your biggest competitor goes out of business and you get to buy their book of business and hire all their really good employees. That's a scenario. Maybe there's a new technology that comes down the pike. So you take 4 or 5 of these scenarios and independently you make a plan for each one as if that was the exact way the future was going to be and you knew that. And then as the future unfolds, you'll be wrong. It won't be like any of them. But because you've done that planning, you'll be able to cut and paste different parts of your plan and you'll be much better prepared for an uncertain future. So that's the technique that you use as a leader when it comes to planning. So just to sum up the leadership piece, the timeless part of leadership is see the vision and say the vision. The pandemic part is your vision needs to go back to the basics and use scenario planning. So let's move into management now. There's 2 functions of management. The first one is helping people do their job better. I'm not exactly sure who's the manager and who's the worker in this picture, but somebody's helping somebody. And as managers, our job is to help people do their jobs better. One of the ways we do that is we give them really clear expectations of what a good job looks like. If you think about it, we have, as entrepreneurs, we tend to have intuitive sense of what a good job looks like, but we often don't explicitly express that. The other thing we do, we give people training, we give people tools, we give people time to do their work. We used to give them office space, but that's not going on anymore. But we do all these things to help people do their jobs better. That's helping them do things right. The second part of management is to align what people do with where the rest of the company is going, with the vision. This goes back to the vision of leadership. So it would be not helpful if somebody did really good work, but it was going off in a crazy direction that didn't help the rest of the organization. So as managers, we want to align people's work, and that's helping them do the right thing. So those are the 2 timeless parts of management. What happens now? Well, in remote managing, particularly when people are not in the office on a daily basis, or whether they may have coordinated shifts that they come in and different schedules, etc. We need as managers to put in more structure. And you may be wondering what a picture of a jellyfish and a hamburger has to do with each other. The jellyfish don't need a lot of structure. They don't have bones because their environment provides that structure. The ocean provides it. There's a lot of unconscious structure that happens because you're in a work environment physically all together. When that goes away, we have to be explicit about putting that structure in place, and I'll get into some details. One example is the McDonald's hamburger. McDonald's has a training facility in Illinois at their headquarters called Hamburger University. No joke. And they have decided whether when you're building a hamburger, whether the ketchup goes on before the pickles or the pickles go on before the ketchup. I actually don't know which they've decided on, but they pick one. They don't leave it up to the people in each store to figure that out. Why? Because they want a consistent, they call it mouthfeel. They don't even call it taste because it's a McDonald's, I guess. But they call it a mouthfeel, and they have decided this is the consistency that we want throughout our organization. So they put that structure in place. Now, you may be wondering or worried, am I going to be a micromanager if I put this kind of structure in place? Because that's a big concern for a lot of entrepreneurs. What I found is that entrepreneurs tend to be very intuitive and not necessarily procedural. And we worry about being procedural because we don't want to be micromanagers. Here's the distinction that I use. If it helps directly affect the customer, or maybe even indirectly affect the customer, then it's not micromanaging. If it's just your opinion of how things should go and it really doesn't affect the customer, then it is micromanaging, and stop it. But in this case, McDonald's figured this is how they want their customers to interact with their hamburgers, so it's a direct thing for them. So I'll give you some examples of the kinds of structure we need to put in place in a pandemic. The irony is that to be more personal, we need to be more structured, particularly when people are not working in an office together. When you're in the office together, you just kind of bump in, hey, how's your weekend? You can kind of see if somebody's down, if somebody's busy. You know all that stuff without a lot of structure. But that personal touch disappears when we're home. And sometimes, particularly now, when the kids are out of school, when we may be with people that are sick or potentially sick, there's a lot more stress on the personal side. And we need to structure in ways that will help alleviate that. So here's one example of structuring culture. One is allow for introverts. So introverts don't necessarily want to socialize at work. So you need to make it okay for people not to do some of this stuff. But here are some things that other companies are doing. One is they have non-work related check-ins. And in one case I know of, they were doing this red, yellow, green thing on a Zoom call. They would start out, everybody would hold up a piece of paper, whether it was red, yellow, green, about how they were doing emotionally, not the work, and just say, here's a sentence or two about why I'm red or why I'm yellow or why I'm green, just to get that a little bit connected. People are sharing lunches and drinks on Zoom. I have mine here. It happens to be water because it's just 10 o'clock in the morning. But and then people are doing team coffees, people are doing yoga, meditation, whatever works. But my point is, as a leader, as a manager, and these ideas can come up from everybody, you need to structure time in to connect with people. And I'm recommending that people, you schedule time with your direct reports just to talk about how they're doing personally. And share a little bit about what's going on for you. Be human about this. If you're not a little scared and confused, you're not paying attention, and they are as well. So make it safe to have those conversations. I'll tell you a little bit about what's changed for me. I don't listen to the news as much as I used to because it drives me nuts. The way things are headed, the things that I can't do anything about. I'm not totally putting my head in the sand, but I'm not listening as much. I'm not on Twitter as much for the same reason, even though there's a part of Twitter that I just think is hilarious and I love it. The other part of it has been getting me depressed, and so I don't do that as much. The worst time for me actually is in the morning when I wake up before I get out of bed. I don't know why, but it's just like, oh my God, how terrible is it? By the end of the day at night, I just crash. That doesn't bother me. But if I get up and get into a routine, then I'm doing better. So I force myself to do that. So that's kind of stuff that's going on for me. You can share that with people. You can be human in these times. Another piece of structure is we need to decide as managers and as leaders what should be asynchronous and what should be synchronous. So asynchronous is things that happen not at the same time. Synchronous happens at the same time. A phone call is synchronous. I'm on one end of the call, you're on the other at the same time. Email is asynchronous. I write the email when it makes sense, when it's convenient for me. You answer it when it's convenient for you. There's times when that's a terrible way to go. If you've ever tried to schedule a meeting by email, you say, how's Tuesday at 9:30? You wait 3 hours. The person comes back. Tuesday 9:30 doesn't work. How's Wednesday? You don't get to it for an hour and a half. You go, Wednesday? What time Wednesday? 2 hours later, they go back, Wednesday at 11. Well, 6 hours ago, Wednesday at 11 was fine, but now that's booked. You just get on the phone. Some things are better synchronously, some things are better asynchronously. These two links I have here in the bottom are Twitter feeds that have a lot of good information about this distinction, because there's a lot of companies that have been asynchronous since they began years ago, and they've really learned a lot about this. But as managers, that's the structure that we have to put in place. We can't just take the old structure and the things we used to do and say, oh, we'll just do it on Zoom and everything will be fine. It won't. Another thing we need to do is get better at meetings. I don't think you'll ever get the applause that this guy's getting. The good news is I don't think you'll ever look as dorky as that guy. So you'll be good there. Most people think that meetings suck. I think most meetings do, but I think meetings could be the manager's superpower if they're done right. And one of the reasons that they're not done right is they're not planned and thought about. So here's some tips on better meetings. One is have fewer of them. This comes from knowing what should be asynchronous and what should be synchronous. Know what type of meeting each one should be. There's at least a dozen different kinds of meetings for different purposes. And as the person who's organizing it, you need to know which ones you want to use. I think most people know more kinds of coffee drinks at Starbucks than they do kinds of meetings. That's a mistake. Zoom is exhausting. 15 minutes is the new hour. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to keep this to 15 minutes, but I'm going to try. And then there's this thing called maker time and manager time. If you're a manager, your work is meetings. And so typically your day is chopped up into hour blocks of different meetings. And it doesn't matter when they happen. That's what your day is all about. But somebody who's a maker, they have to get into the zone to really be good. So makers are people that write computer code, people that do tax forms, people that do legal briefs, people that do graphic arts, people that are creative coming up with, say, a new marketing plan. They need big chunks of time, a half a day or a full day. And if you have a meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, even if it's only a 20-minute meeting, that can screw up their ability to get into the zone for the whole half a day. So if you have makers, schedule your time with your makers, your meetings. If you have to have meetings, schedule it at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, or ideally schedule days when you have no meetings at all with your makers, and try to say Wednesday's our meeting day and we do all that stuff then, or whatever day works for you. But these are some techniques for getting better at meetings. This was a picture from an article I saw in Harvard Business Review, and it was about how to spy on your employees without pissing them off, is basically the gist of it. It said how to monitor employees ethically or something like that. And the money quote was, with transition to work from home having happened so rapidly, employers are wondering how much work is actually going on. And this just astounded me. This was literally the picture, and they talked about companies that are using keyboard monitoring software so that they can track every employee's keyboard strokes. There's other software that takes a picture of your screen every 2 or 3 minutes and sends it into headquarters just to monitor what's going on. And it occurred to me, that was my reaction. I didn't know what they were thinking. How could they do this? Because my work is focused so differently. And here's what I realized. If you consider every job that needs to be done as a function, it has 4 parts. It has a trigger, input, transformation, and output. So I'll give you an example of one of these functions is payroll. The trigger is a calendar event. It's every other Tuesday or whatever. The input is we put in people's time, we put in their salary, their deductions, we send that in. The transformation is the calculations that go on, and the output is money gets to the right place and the forms get filled out. And if you think about every job that happens in your organization this way, the cat and the goldfish thing will make a little more sense. The problem is if we have remote working, do we monitor the output or do we monitor the transformation? And I'm used to monitoring the output. But when you start to have to look at keyboard monitoring and capturing people's screens, you're really not looking at the output, you're looking at the transformation stage. You think that somebody's in the office doing work. Well, they may be, but they may not be. The only time I worked in an office, I've literally never had a job. I've always had companies. But I did spend 2 years as a contractor working for Mobil Oil, actually, before it would merge with Exxon. And so I went to the office. I was doing technical writing and training. And there was a guy across the hall from me, an employee, not a contractor. And he would come in every morning and spend an hour or two reading the paper. I could hear him calling City Hall and complaining about potholes on his street. He might have looked like he was working, but I don't think he was being paid to do that stuff. That wasn't the output they were paying for. But let me give you an example. If your process is designed like this, let's say we're going to make a cake, and this is the extent of your process, and you measure the output, if the cake is lousy, you're in trouble. You have to start back. So in that case, people tend to go, well, we better monitor the middle part, the transition, the recipe part. The solution is not to monitor earlier on in the process. The solution is to get better processes. So to break this process down into sub-processes. And anybody who's paying attention knows I may not know anything about making a cake, but if you make these into sub-processes, then you can monitor the output of each one and not worry about the transition. And that will solve the problem of knowing how much work is going on. If you haven't devised the right processes, there's no way you can know how much work is going on. If you have, then you can just look at the output of the work and know what's going on. The reason that I say this is because this is how companies are born. They're not born when a mommy company loves a daddy company very much and blah, blah, blah. They're born when somebody gets this disease that I've had my entire working life, and they start doing this. But as companies scale, they don't scale like this. You don't have 100 one-man bands on stage. They scale like this. And what you see here is specialization. You see people with very deep expertise in a very narrow area, all coordinated by a conductor who incidentally doesn't make any of the music. That's the CEO in a company who doesn't make any of the activity that customers care about. So another way to look at this is that a company only has to do three things. They have to make something people want to buy, that's a product or a service. They have to sell that thing to those people, and they have to build an organization to support the people that do the making and the selling. That's the whole purpose of the organization. And as you expand the company and as this specialization starts to happen, it starts to look like this. There's different jobs and different functions underneath each of these. And the work then becomes more process-oriented and less intuitive. And if you expand this whole thing out, it gets crazy. It looks like this. Each of these is a function, not necessarily a job, because even a very small company is performing all of these functions at some time. But when the companies are small, they tend to be doing it intuitively. As they grow, one person or one job title can perform many functions. So we want to build those functions. That's our job as managers, is to design the functions so that we can monitor them properly in the output stage and not have to worry about keep people's keystrokes or capturing their screen every minute. So this is a little summary of where we've gone today. For leadership, the timeless aspects of it is see the vision, say the vision, the pandemic aspects are bring that vision back to the basics of why you're in business and who you serve. Use scenario planning to look forward to the future. On the management side, our management job, our timeless job is to help people do better work and align their work with the company vision. And then in the pandemic, what we do differently is we put more structure in place to be human, to connect with people, to structure communication asynchronously versus synchronously, and to get better at meetings and to design better functions. So that's what I've got so far. I think it was a little bit over 15 minutes, but I hope it wasn't an hour. If anybody would like a copy of this entire deck, please email me, john@ceobootcamp.com. And we have time for some questions.
Well, let me just start with one thing that you said that really hit home for me, as you're intimately familiar with our growing pains as we've gone through exactly these steps from the one-man band to the mini orchestra that we're trying to get together. But it's interesting to me how you described the sub-processes and the creation of those as the way to not only monitor, but to me, even if we have folks on this webinar who maybe are a real estate agent, maybe they are self-employed or small, maybe they don't have 10 people, maybe it's 2 or 3 people. And it's very easy to get off track, especially in the pandemic. It's easy to, outside the pandemic, say, I have an assistant, but I might as well just do it myself. And it really is our weakness in not having this identified as clearly as we can, not only having those processes for other people to follow, but that structure for yourself. If you're self-employed, I'm sure a lot of people are feeling out of their routine. This is a really great exercise to go back, not only to look at what you should be doing for efficiency purposes, or where is really the strength in this, in your business, to say, okay, here's cut the fat, because now it's pandemic and we really need to be more effective. This same tool applies even if you're by yourself, I would think.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff is actually good management practice in normal times. It's more necessary in a pandemic, I think.
Sure.
Another way to think about this, rather than the orchestra analogy, is if you were a chef or had a chef in your restaurant that made really good food but didn't have a recipe, you couldn't scale. You'd be stuck here and you could never get to here. If you take the time to develop the recipe, that's when it starts to look like this. And now you can scale, you can train, you can say, oh, I'm going to put somebody in charge of just doing this part. And I'm going to be able to tell if they've got it right. And I'm be able to fix it if they've got it wrong before it comes out here. It's a different way of thinking than a lot of entrepreneurs are used to, which is why a lot of businesses tend to stay small.
Another thing that comes up is that you have told us before, you can't look at it's easy for people to look at the assistant and go, oh, I'm frustrated, but we have to communicate with them how, like you said, how to know they're doing a good job, not just what you need done, not just the list of tasks. And that, I think, is a common trap that people fall into. So they say, well, I need you to do the payroll. Well, how do I know if payroll was done well? Did people get the right paychecks? Was it on time? Give them that kind of metrics, if you will, to grade themselves by, and then you'll know better. It also helps you as the business owner to know what types of tasks to give them and what types of person to look for. If you know more clearly, because you have the recipe, what needs to be done, you have a better opportunity to source the right assistant so that you aren't feeling frustrated or slowed down by that person. And we've certainly been in those situations. I think one of the most pointed things that John said to me in our personal experiences with him was, I was, frustrated with a certain couple situations that we were enduring. And I said, but I would never do that to somebody, or I would never take that action. And he said, if they were going to do what you would do, they would be your competitor, not your employee.
Yeah, that's a common frustration with entrepreneurs, is they don't think like a business owner. Well, they're not.
Yeah.
And this is something I had to learn, how to appreciate what people are good at while you're aware of their limitations. And give them the kind of work that they can be good at and excel at. The other part that you mentioned about telling people when they do a good job, this relates to the fact that most of us nowadays do what's called knowledge work. This is a term Peter Drucker coined, I think, back in the 60s or 70s. And the difference between knowledge work and physical work, if my job is to paint this room, it's obvious when I've started. It's obvious when I'm done. It's obvious to everybody when I'm halfway there. But if my job is to do market research on a certain competitor, how do I know when I've done enough? Are we talking about a 10-minute Google search? Are we talking about hiring a private investigator to go, whatever? What defines a good job? Well, that's our job as managers, is to figure out what a good job looks like and explain that to employees. Because everybody, most people, 98% of them anyway, want to go home at the end of the day feeling like I did a good job. They need us to tell them what a good job looks like in this company, in this context, in this situation. And that's part of our job as managers. We often get frustrated because they don't intuitively get it. Well, that limits our ability to hire good people because there aren't that many people that get it. The mind reader population is pretty limited at this time.
It's true.
One of the things that I wanted to mention was the meetings, and how you're saying, you have multiple different types of meetings. So we've always been very focused on work status meetings. Where's this at? Are you having trouble with this? Have you called this client? And so on. And then we try to have the meeting where, is everybody okay? How's everybody doing? Sometimes it inevitably wraps into one and the same meeting. And what I try to do is encourage my people to come to me whenever they need me. Just throw yourself on my calendar when you see an opening, when you know I'm available, and let's just chat and see, how you're doing. I am not sure if, we've tried to structure it where we have it monthly or quarterly, kind of a check-in, but how far would you go to make sure that, am I checking on my people often enough? Are they doing okay? I don't know if anything is going on in their family, for example, to say, are you stressed out in the pandemic? Is there anything else that's happening other than the stress of work and the tax season and everything? So, I want to leave them alone. I don't want to push them if they don't want to talk to me, but I also want to make sure that they know I'm available for the human factor type of meeting and the check-in.
Right.
So, I don't want to be, a therapist. I don't want to be the one to always, please come and tell me if you have a problem. I don't want to keep saying that, but how do I do as a leader a good job to make sure they know I'm available? I can talk to them, kind of that human vulnerable factor, if you will, without it looking like, I'm pushing them to do it.
I think what we have to do, and particularly in these times, is to be more upfront with what we're trying to do. So you can call people and say, look, I just want to check in with you personally. And I want to be available to you, and just say what you said to me, what you said here. I want to be available. I don't want to push you to talk about it. If you don't want to talk about it with me, that's fine. But if you do, let's chat. How are things going at home? I'm happy. Part of it is also sharing what's going on for you, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that paves the way for this. We don't want to work in a place where we always have to wear the mask. But we don't want to work naked either. So there's a balance. And part of it is just being upfront and saying, look, I've never managed in a pandemic before. Are you okay? I want to be available if you're not. And say that. The other part of it is keep track of when you talk to people about this stuff, and don't let somebody just slip through the cracks because maybe they're not the squeaky wheel and you go, oh, they're probably doing fine. And then you look and you go, oh man, I haven't talked to them about anything besides work for 3 weeks. That's not good. And keep notes about what you do know about people, about their dogs, about their parents, about their kids, and so that you can bring that up. So you can't keep that stuff all in your head. You have to be a little more procedural about it, a little more systematic. in these times. And it does make your productivity and their productivity a little less, but ultimately it's better in the long haul. So I don't know if that answered the question, but.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have to say that, for us and a lot of our clients and a lot of my friends say, well, you guys can work from home anyway. I mean, you can do taxes from anywhere. And yes, that is true as a technology. Technology allows us, and I think we were very lucky to be able to have the infrastructure in place to move remotely within a day when we had decided to work from home. But I think it's that human factor that people are still missing, because now that most of our staff were back in the office, there's a certain different kind of a hum in there, camaraderie, and I can hear if somebody's struggling with something and talking about it, and it makes the ability to meet and address some of those questions really quickly. Oh, I just have a question, so that you can move on. It's a different feeling working in a team. Remote works great. We're very productive, but I think a lot of people are missing the point too, that working in the office sometimes is easier, even though we may not talk to each other for the whole entire day, but then we
Right.
can for 5-10 minutes in the middle here and there, and we can solve 20,000 problems, it seems like, in those 10 minutes. So it's definitely the work, but also that human factor that makes a big difference, remote or in the office. So
Yeah, people are social creatures, and we gravitate to those settings where we're just bumping around with people. When that's not possible, either because of a pandemic, or like I said, there's some companies that have made a choice to be this way, so they could hire people all around the world who work on different schedules and et cetera. You have to forcibly replace that. You have to consciously do it. You have to put structures in place. Companies that work remotely from the get-go, they often do once or twice a year where they bring everybody together physically for a week or so, and they spend the extra money to fly them in, because they're not spending money on office space and rent and other things. So you do have to make a conscious effort to figure out how to replace that social structure in ways that work for you and your group.
I think another distinction you just said is the choice. It's different. Like before this happened, Marina and I would be like, oh, if I could just work from home today, and kind of run away from the phone and not get interrupted. Like that ability to work in solitude, it's like working 5 days straight in 5 hours because you don't get interrupted. So when that's your choice, it feels different and empowering to stay home. But when you were told you have to stay home and it's no longer a choice, then it's like, well, now I'm missing the office. It's like straight hair, curly hair thing. Like you want what you can't have. And the other thing
what is this hair you're talking about?
I'll send you the new hairbrush. It's fantastic. Okay. Another part of that too, I think, is like that, like Marina was talking about with the camaraderie. When we specifically decided to put people at home, we were very much with the checklist. We've got the IT guy. Do we have what we need? Are all the structures in place? We fell down on, hey, John, what do we do to make sure that, we still have the people in place? You smacked us on the chin and said, hey guys, got to deal with the people too, not just, okay, does the server work? Can you have access? How do we do the phones? Like it's, especially being technical people, it's our nature to go first to, does the technical stuff work? But that's only half the battle. That's really not the balance of it. And whether you have a team or you're by yourself, that adjustment still happened. And if you were accustomed to working one way as a solo practitioner in whatever specialty you're in, you still needed to be mindful of that. Does the technical piece work if I'm working differently? And am I okay socially?
Yeah. And I did a modified version of parts of this talk for a group of HR professionals. And then one of them presented some stats that she had worked up. Many of the middle management and below people were feeling very stressed about working remotely and feeling like they were not getting as much done. But she said the executives are loving it because they're feeling like, oh, I'm free to focus on the things that I need to focus on. And I wasn't able to do that in the office. And first of all, I was surprised by that, but I really think that's because we haven't ever looked at this as a choice.
Mm-hmm.
We have not said what works asynchronously, what works synchronously, what kind of culture do we want to develop in our company. Cultures develop whether you pay attention to them or not.
Mm-hmm.
But if you pay attention to them, you can develop a culture that serves your goals and your leadership and your vision. So.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of time blocking. It has always, that's actually how we started. When the very first exercise we ever have done when we started the coaching program is to say, what are you spending your time on during your day? You're running around like a chicken with your head cut off. What is it that you're doing? What is your A time and B time and C time, et cetera, et cetera. And I constantly go back to that, and I made all my staff do that exercise. And I think we need to come back and redo that exercise now that there's more staff in place and some of that work is getting pushed around between different people. But I feel like the time blocking now is even more important than ever, because if you do have a day that is your maker day, so the push time, as we called it in our coaching program, where this is the day that I sit down and I focus on tax returns. So I sit down and I review all the tax returns in my review queue. I don't want to answer emails. I don't want to answer calls. I don't want to talk about the tax returns that are in progress. This is my day to review all the tax returns. Unless I stick to it, and unless all my staff knows that this is what I'm doing and I should not be interrupted, it doesn't matter if I'm home or if I'm at the office. This is like the sacred time to do it. Same thing when we have our manager time, when Joanne and I have time blocked aside for meetings. And now this pandemic has thrown a complete wrench in that equation. John, if you remember, in January, we set our plan for the whole year. On our days that we spent on to work on our business, we set a specific day in the week to do that. And we scheduled out every single week of what we're going to do, and not just like rip that up and throw that away. It's still important not to miss that and restructure that and communicate that with your staff to say, I know things are absolutely crazy and there's PPP loans and tax returns, but Joanne and I still need a day to work on our business. And that's the day I'm not going to be talking to you about the tax returns. And I think that now I feel like I'm taking that back a little bit more and putting structure back in my calendar and sticking to it. You know, it was really hot time at the moment where I was taking client calls. It just was an emergency type of work, and it didn't matter if it was Thursday at 3 when I would usually be working on this. And you know, it's more important than ever to make sure that even it may not be a full day, even if it is only 3 hours a week to spend on this important part of your business, that you stick to it, and no matter what, this is your time. And if you need to shift it around, you do, but don't lose that time, because weeks go by and here we are, it's already, you know, middle of June, and it's crazy.
So yeah, you hit on a good point. When most people do time tracking, they write down what they were working on, and usually email is the biggest part of that, and they go, oh, email's terrible. And the point is not what you're working on, but why you're doing it. And the why you're doing it ultimately comes back to one of these three things. You're either doing it to make something that customers want to buy, or to sell to those customers, to connect with them, marketing, etc., or to build the organization that supports the people that do the other two things. And if you look at, well, just take the emails. Why are you doing these emails? You'll find that some of them are in this category, some of them they're in that category. You wouldn't want to get rid of them entirely. You might want to be more efficient and more effective at some of that. You might want to get rid of some of them. But if you look at the reason that you do stuff, it's a very different calculus from what you're doing. So yeah, that's a good point. And then the piece that you mentioned is A time, B time, et cetera. That's your impact. So I could be doing something on the make side that I'm doing it and I know why I'm doing it, but I'm not really, that's not the best use of my time. It's better for somebody else to do that part of it, and I can do something else and still be making time. So those are the parts to that. Good.
The biggest waste of money this year was the 2020 planner. She was so mad too. She was just complaining the other day, like, I spent so much time doing that plan, and like every Thursday, everything is in the calendar, what I was going to do, what I was going to focus on, and all it should have said was PPP for 4 months.
Right, and then we got punched in the mouth.
That's exactly. That's exactly what happened. I do have to say that I feel pretty lucky in, you know, our team. My team has been there. I've taken on this PPP stuff, and you know, my tax folks have been, you know, pushing out tax returns and kind of working behind the scenes and doing as much as possible. And you know, I felt sometimes I wasn't necessarily available to deal with a lot of that kind of an ongoing tax thing, but everybody's been really supportive, and you know, people have taken on different roles and have, you know, picked up the pieces. And we often talk about what you, John, say to us, you know, this is not your job, but you know, when you have to pinch in, you know that you're doing, it's not necessarily what you're supposed to be doing, part of your job, but yeah. Now as we reallocate, thank you so much for pitching in and doing it. And
well, and you guys have done an amazing job with all the webinars and all the research you've done on the PPP and the loans and all that stuff. That's just an amazing body of work. So that you didn't plan for.
Mm-hmm. That planner was useless, and we didn't plan for the new PPP loan forgiveness application to drop last night either. So Jackie's hiding under the bed with her magnifying glass as we speak. That's why you don't see her today.
So Tuesday's webinar is going to be a little different.
Exactly.
If she comes back out from under the bed. Thank you so much, John. This has been spectacular. We really appreciate your feedback and your input. For those of you who are in the audience or listening to this recording, you can see John's contact details in the slide deck. You can request those directly from him. As always, all of our webinars are recorded and distributed to you automatically. You can find them on our website, on our Facebook pages, and on our YouTube channel. So thank you so much as always.
No, my pleasure.
Have a great weekend.